Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today's video is going to be a little bit different. It does have a lot of drama, so I think we're just going to jump right into it. So today we are going to be talking about the love triangle that was in Fleetwood Mac. Genuinely, I didn't fully understand kind of how it went until I did some Googling and read a whole bunch, and now I have a pretty decent understanding of it, I think. So that is what we're going to discuss today. And we are going to just be talking about the love triangle with the 5 members of the band that were in the band when it got like big and famous, because they had a lot of lineup changes right at the start, kind of until they found their groove and they got the members that would eventually become Fleetwood Mac as we know it today. But we're not talking about the band and kind of how they blew up and stuff. That's not what we're talking about. We are purely talking about the members. So in December of 1974, Mick Fleetwood visited Sound City Studios in Los Angeles, and that is where he met with Keith Olsen, and he played Mick Frozen Love, a song that was sung by Buckingham Nicks, a group comprised of guitarist Lindsey Buckingham and singer Stevie Nicks. Now, the two were a couple at that time. They had known each other actually since like high school, but it wasn't until like years later that they made a band together and they fell in love. And I believe you can find their original songs on Spotify. I believe you're able to find them still. So at the studio, Mick met Lindsey and he talked to him about joining his band, Fleetwood Mac, but Lindsey said that he would only consider doing it if his girlfriend, Stevie Nicks, could come and join as well. Well, on New Year's Eve of 1974, Lindsey and Stevie officially became members of Fleetwood Mac. So the band's lineup that we know is Mick Fleetwood, our girl Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, and then we also have Christine McVie and her husband, John McVie, or Mac. Fleetwood Mac, makes sense. That's how they came up with the name. Anyways, so John and Christine were already married, they were in the band, and then when Stevie joined, her and Christine actually became like really fast friends. It didn't take them long at all to strike up a friendship. So it's really refreshing to see and to learn that there wasn't any sort of like competition really behind them. Even still today, they talk pretty highly of each other, which I think is really cool because in today's media, we see a lot of media outlets trying to pit women against each other. Well, in this case, I'm sure Christine was like, oh, finally another woman in the band, because up until then it had really been comprised of like her and then men when she joined. So she was kind of excited to have another woman, I think, in the band with her. In 1975, the band released their second self-titled album, and it sold over 500,000 copies within the first year. So pretty successful in 75, I would think. 2 major hits on that album were Landslide and Rhiannon. Both were written by Stevie. I honestly think that Rhiannon is kind of a cool name, and like Rhea for a nickname. I don't know, I think it's kind of cool. Even though the latest album was a success, the band was struggling in a lot of different ways. Now, this was the 70s, so cocaine was a pretty big deal. Not that it's not today, but I mean, back then people were going hard. Christine was the band's vocalist and keyboardist. She joined in 1970 after her husband, John, joined in 1967, and he was part of the band's original lineup. Like I said, so like that's how they got the name Fleetwood Mac, because they called him Mac, but in this video, I'm just going to refer to him as John. It's a little bit easier. Christine and John divorced in 1976, and they would only speak to each other about music. Nothing else besides that. So unfortunately now these two are Splitsville. But even though they broke up, the show still goes on. The band then went on to start working on Rumours, which is their biggest, best album. So many of the songs that they are famous for is off of that album, which after hearing this story genuinely made me love it even more, because you get a little bit more of an insight into what was going on and kind of what these songs mean. After hearing this story and then going and like listening to their music, I heard the songs in a completely different light. It was actually really cool. And unfortunately, around this time, Lindsey and Stevie also broke up. So now unfortunately we have two separate couples in the same band that started together but have now broken up. And they wrote Dreams and Go Your Own Way as digs at each other. So pretty much the entire Rumours album was just them all making diss tracks about each other and shit talking each other. And then they made their exes perform music that was about them and was kind of calling them out or saying shitty things kind of in reference to that band member, but then they had to like perform it, which I think is incredible. At the beginning of 1977, the band went out on a worldwide tour, the Rumours tour, to promote their album. Stevie and Lindsay began fighting after he mocked her on stage, so things really started to escalate after this point. And around this time is when Stevie found out from a doctor that she had a dime-sized hole in her nasal cartilage due to her cocaine habit. The hole was big enough to cause a brain hemorrhage. Thankfully, that has yet to happen, knock on wood, but you never know. When Stevie would get headaches, she would dissolve aspirin in a glass of water and just pour it up her nose. Listen, people were wild in the 70s. It was during the same year that Mick and his wife, Jenny Boyd, who had divorced back in like 1976, they got back together and remarried. However, later in that same year that they remarried, Mick and Stevie started having an affair together. Now, Jenny was never part of the band, but she was married to Mick when it like blew up and they started to get big. I think that they were only divorced for like a year, so they didn't really have a lot of like separation time. And then they made it back together, and then he starts having an affair with Stevie, which is just incredible. Mick and Jenny had 2 kids together, and now this is a quote from Stevie. "Never in a million years could you have told me that would happen," like in reference to the affair that she had with Mick. "Everybody was angry because Nick was married to a wonderful girl and had 2 wonderful children. I was horrified. I loved these people. I loved his family. So it couldn't possibly work out, and it didn't. I just couldn't." So it kind of makes you wonder, like, did he make the first move kind of on her? Is that why she's like, yeah, everyone was really upset? I don't know. Based on this quote and literally this quote alone, and I might be thinking like way too much into this, but it really makes me think that possibly he was the one that made the first move on her, because she talks about how great his wife is and how great his kids are. So I don't really know. That's purely speculation on my part. However, a year before the affair between Mick and Stevie, the band did a cover shoot for Rolling Stone, and it was shot by Annie Leibovitz. The featured shot from the shoot was the band all laying in bed together with Mick and Stevie cuddled up together. I love this photo. I think it's so cool. The guy, I think it's Lindsay, is just like laying off by himself. I love that. Like, that's me. And everyone else is like getting all cozy up with each other. And according to Stevie, that kind of planted the seed for the affair. However, thankfully it didn't last long. Mick and Jenny divorced once again in 1978. I'm sure that his affair had to do with it, and I wouldn't doubt that he was sleeping with other women around this time as well. While the band was in one of their recording sessions for Tusk, which is a fantastic song, Stevie found out that Mick was also having an affair with her good friend, Sarah Rector, who was married to somebody else at the same time. I mean, look, say what you want to about this man, he had to have had game, and being part of a very famous, very successful band probably had a lot to do with it as well. Now, years later, Stevie said, "I lost Mick," which honestly wasn't that big of a deal because that was a rocky relationship. But losing my friend Sarah, that was a huge blow. Sarah was banished from the studio by the rest of the band. No one was speaking, and I wouldn't even look directly at Mick. That went on for months, and it was a great fodder for writing. The songs poured out of us. Now, Tusk, that album that they made, it took over a year to get it all sung and recorded because nobody wanted to talk or like let alone work with anybody else in the band. So you have Lindsay and Stevie, who were in a relationship while joining the band and during its success and whatnot. They were in a relationship. Then they break up. Then Stevie sleeps with Mick, and then they break up, and he sleeps with one of her good friends. And then you have these two that were married at the beginning of the success of the band and everything, and then they divorce, and they don't want to talk to each other anymore because they're a divorced couple. So essentially, everybody was sleeping with everybody, and then when things blew up, they're all writing songs about each other, just essentially shit-talking one another, and then making their ex, like I said, perform that song that is a diss about them. So clearly, no one wants to work with anybody. Nobody wants to talk. So it takes a full year to record an album because none of them want to be in the studio together, like around each other, working together. Now, eventually, Mick and Sarah do get married in 1988, but then they divorced in 1995, and Stevie has been quoted saying that her and Sarah are still really good friends. They worked through it, so I mean, things are okay there. So now you have Stevie being good friends with Mick's ex-wife. Well, Stevie is friends with Mick's ex-wife first, then those two have an affair. So her best friend and her affair partner, they have an affair and then get married and then split up. So you have that going on. And even though Stevie and Lindsay had been broken up for a while, there was a lot of bad blood between the pair. While in New Zealand for the Tusk tour, Lindsay tried to trip Stevie while performing, and he even threw his guitar at her. Stevie told Rolling Stone that they stopped the show and then a fight broke out backstage. He went off and we all ran at breakneck speed back to the dressing room to see who could kill him first. Christine got to him first and then I got to him second. The bodyguards were trying to get in the middle of all of us. So even though there's bad blood between everybody, Christine and Stevie are still really good friends. And not only that, but the whole band has to know, like, okay, throwing a guitar at another band member, yes, we all kind of hate each other in different ways at this time, but that is so uncalled for. And trying to trip her, like, not only are you causing harm on a person, but you're also causing harm to the band, how you guys are all making money. So Christine said that, I think he's the only person I ever slapped, in reference to Lindsay and kind of this whole scenario. So around this time when this is happening, a lot of the band is going out on their solo careers, and they kind of unofficially just dissolve the band, sort of. Everyone's worried about their solo career. None of them want to work together. So the band just kind of dissolves and like ceases to exist. Now, Stevie Nicks, she's had a successful solo career. The other ones, I genuinely had never heard music by them. So I think now they're all kind of just quietly living their own lives. They have gotten back together a couple of times for some sort of like reunion-ish type stuff. And now Mick and Stevie, they seem to be decent friends. Christine and Stevie have always been friends. They've been photographed together and whatnot. I don't think that the band will ever get back together, like, for good. One thing I forgot to mention is that Christine actually at one point was having an affair with the lighting engineer that worked like for them on their tour. And the song You Make Loving Fun, or You Make Loving Easy, no, I think it's You Make Loving Fun is theirs. She wrote that in reference to the lighting engineer, which, you know what, girl, if you're gonna like date anybody in the crew that like helps set up and, you know, make your tour happen and look good, it is the lighting engineer, because that man is gonna make sure that you look good. So, you know what, props to her. No judgment here. Honestly, no judgment on all of them, because let's be real, everybody was sleeping with everybody at that time. It was kind of the whole, you know, free love type movement. They were definitely a hippie free spirit band, so it was just a kind of different time back then. People sort of had different ideals and whatnot, so I thought that this was incredibly interesting, learning about all of them and whatnot. So Rumours is their best-selling album, like, by far. And it definitely was because of the emotion that came out of their songs, and the fact that they were just all shitting on one another is incredible. But then Tusk, the album that they made after that one, that is their second best-selling album, even though it took them almost a year to get produced and get made. It's their second highest-selling album that they ever did together, which is kind of cool, because even though the band, you know, for the most part hated each other, the music and the art that came out of all of that pain and hardship was really beautiful. Like, it is a good album. I definitely recommend listening to it. But that is it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up down below and comment. And you may or may not be seeing another video kind of in reference to Jenny Boyd. Her story to some degree is not over, so we might be talking about that later. Just a little hint. But that is it for me today. Thank you guys so much. I hope that you have a fantastic day, and be sure to come back for another video. Bye, guys.